All right, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us for this fireside chat with the guys at PlayCheck Games. They're just coming out the back of a lovely panel with Jiho from Sky Mavis and Gabby from Yale Guild Games, where you might have recognized Niels is from. We've also joined by Patrick, who's one of the co-founders of PlayCheck Games. And I guess we're going to use the next 15, 20 minutes to introduce the world to what PlayCheck are up to and dive into a little bit more about their motivations behind it and where they see their space emerging. As ever, please feel free to put questions either in the chat or through the marvelous Ask a Question button. But best place to start. Niels, take us through what PlayCheck is.
All right. Here we go. So actually, we are a fairly new company, and our mission is to bring the play-to-earn business model to the masses, and by making blockchain-infused casual mobile games that reward playtime spent on them. And we want our users to earn as we earn. Basically, there are some challenges that we seek to address to reach our goals. And commonly, we see that on the user side, there's not much real value for in-game rewards and accomplishments, and real money and time spent on in-game content is burnt one way, not necessarily invested most times. Play to earn then as a business model is what we see that is the model that seeks to provide gamers a way to liquidate their time and money spent. And essentially, P2E is rising right now. It's been a big wave, and it is, although it is limited by a few issues still, it is not without setbacks and inherent to the world of crypto, as some of the people in the chat have mentioned as well. First-time experiences tend to be confusing and involve a lot of unfamiliar steps. And there's so many transactions, so many wallets. It can be clunky. NFTs can also be expensive. Free-to-play features virtually don't exist and is essentially a relic of a previous model. And there are a lot of games in the space that are locked to certain platforms, certain restrictions, certain spaces in that we see again that there's gamers waiting beyond those restrictions, past those hurdles. And bridging play to earn to mobile gamers is something that we see as a company that can give rise to a new mindset for the mainstream customer. And I believe here is how we started on that track. So we came out with a proof of concept 2 years ago with Battle Racers. We introduced a way to combine several NFTs into a race car using a token that they can earn via gameplay, that our players can earn via gameplay. And it's something that we wish to bring over to mobile. And through the liquidity of both the fungible token that's used for this game and for in the NFTs themselves, we give players a way to be able to get some more value retained out of the assets that they hold, maybe even across games. And it's something that we are sticking to in our design route for the rest of the projects of our company. And essentially, we aim to provide a lot of utility for our NFTs, and basically we support these functionalities from the browser, wherein we started, and then to the next app that we're developing and are actually launching towards the end of the year, which is going to be Battle Racers on mobile. And then beyond that, we're giving players and users the ability to have their value retained across different games that we've made. So it's a long play in that we see that as long as we keep giving this value for holders of our NFTs and players of our games, we give them more incentive to stay, iterate with us, and work with us as a community and keep developing better and better content and gameplay. So we've been at this for quite a while. We have a Discord for Battle Racers. We've done pre-sales before. We are on several different marketplaces like OpenSea, Venly. We've worked with games in the Sandbox and the Decentraland metaverses where you can find us. We've done a couple of cross-branding opportunities with CryptoKitties, Axie, Blockade, and Neon District, and a few others. And basically, we're looking to build more of this as we go along and round out our year. And that's mostly it, actually.
Awesome. You stop sharing that screen. It's always good, I find, to start off with how you guys came together as a team, and like you touched on how long you've been in the game, but how long you've been together as a team and how that's come around.
We found Patrick in China, developing a ton load of mobile games, and myself, I've been working in the MMO biz for quite some time, like 10 years ago, and I've seen it boom, and I've seen it die a slow, painful death as well. And it's something that is very, for me at least personally, I see it as something very humbling, and it's something that I've learned a lot from bringing into a new kind of thing, a new model that we're even working with. And it's certainly helped that I found people like my team of co-founders, and we've been doing this for 2 years, and it's been an enjoyable run so far. We've started out as a blockchain R&D group, and we grew enough to take it beyond that.
Patrick, what were you doing before they found you in China? If you're allowed to tell us.
Yeah, of course. Well, I was working in China for a publisher of free-to-play games that was taking Chinese games and was translating and localizing them for the Western market. So we have plenty of experience with free-to-play and why it sucks, pardon. But that's how we sort of ended up together through one of the great connectors in this space, Gabby. I found Gabby when I was unsuccessful in that space and free-to-play, and we did a blockchain startup together. OV veterans might know that as OP Games, Outplay Games. And sort of with that detour, I landed in Altitude Games, where we came up with Battle Racers, and now are taking this to the next level and breaking play to earn out of the metaverse a little bit and taking it mobile.
What game, when you guys are designing a game, particularly a play to earn game, what are you looking to bake into it?
Fun.
Like just pure fun.
Fun has to be at the forefront, and it has to be engaging, and it needs to be a game. It doesn't have to be spreadsheets and knowledge based. I mean, that's a component, sure. If money is at stake, people will always do that. But we think it needs to be equally fun and not boring. Games will become boring after a time. That's just a fact. So people will always migrate towards something more fun, something new, something novel. And we realized that we want to be part of that ecosystem, or like have this ecosystem of our own, where we create fun, short time, casual games even, and make them fun and also integrate the play to earn mechanic into it as its core. And eventually, people will get over it, and once they will, that's inevitable. We don't have to be delusional about it. Once they do, they hopefully migrate to a game that we're also involved in, and we are trying to create incentives that make that happen.
Okay, so we're accepting the fact that gamers are going to go away at some point. Their attention spans are probably shorter than they used to be. And they're going to not necessarily jump between games, but they're going to move through the portfolio of PlayCheck games, and you're going to tie together this large ecosystem. How do you see that ecosystem of games playing out? Do you think that your games will have similar mechanics, or do you think that you'll try and like vary it up between? I mean, I guess the question here is like, are we going to see Angry Birds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or are we going to see a little bit more variety?
Design-wise, we think that while it could be any genre, any variation, one moment it could be a racing game, it could be a platformer, it could be a tower defense, it could be anything else. It could be casual, it could be more hardcore. But the key part we see in it is that we have to be playing towards the inviting aura of collectability. If there is collectability in a certain game, it's basically the strength of NFTs, and it's something that we really wanted to take advantage of. In that, let's say in terms of a car, people would want to there's that primeval desire to build one or to build something out of build a machine, build a working collection of things. And that is probably what the common thing is we see, because primarily since we're working with NFTs, why not work on something that is essentially that, but in digital form? So it's a digital. We see it as some sort of digital Lego that people can sell for a lot of cash.
Plus, we're all, after all, hunter-gatherers, right? It's not reinventing the wheel. Other companies have done that before, play to earn. That's part of the reason gaming is so attractive to me personally. I don't want to say how many hours I spend on Diablo or something like that, but we want to make different genres happen in play to earn in different games and build different games for that. So whether it's a racing game, whether it's a dungeon crawler, whether it's a card game, ultimately we want to make games with the same philosophy behind it, that you can that your playtime gets rewarded. That if you're good at the game or to a certain degree, you get something out of it beyond pleasure.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask. How many hours have you spent on Diablo?
I don't know, 30,000. I don't. It's hard to several years probably. Yeah.
That's good. That's a good amount. Not too much, not too little. That sounds about right.
I wrote my bachelor thesis on World of Warcraft and gold farming. So
yeah.
Good to have you with us, Pat.
And what sort of timelines are you guys looking at for the release of the launch of the first Battle Racers app, I guess?
Right. We're targeting. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, we're sort of shooting for Q4 this year. December is always the best month to launch something, and we're on track to do that.
Awesome. And I also feel there's only two of you here because the other two team members are, well, I was going to say fairly shy, but they're actually pretty chatty once they get going.
Monica's in the chat right now.
Monica is in the chat right now, doing her job, getting everything plugs. Maybe flesh it out for everyone. Talk about Monica and Sky and how they came to be part of the team and how they fit.
Right. So Monica and Sky. Monica is our community manager and marketing extraordinaire, and she was part of a couple of blockchain projects as well before we met. And she's basically keeping us up to speed with everything that happens in our Discord, in our Twitter, and is the gal to talk to whenever there's any questions you would have over at the Discord and stuff like that. And she's been very, very super helpful with bridging us to our players, which is something that we really see as one of the advantages. Again, as I've said earlier, in developing in crypto, we have to keep communicating, and Monica keeps that bridge standing above wavy waters, I should say. And then Sky is our CDO, and he's, we'd be lucky if we see him pop up out of his room coding. And it's basically the only guy among us who's permanently stuck to a keyboard, programming and debugging every single day. And it's basically the backbone of everything that we run on. So he is in charge actually of everything that we've done, including we've been part of 2 layer 2s already. We are now currently on Polygon. And Sky is the one who's working with all our tech partners, making sure that we're all running.
Awesome. I know we're coming up on time, but one of the things that I'd like to get you guys to talk about, if possible, slightly out in the open, is that play to earn's a relatively new gaming category. It's currently been defined by Axie Infinity. You guys have recently been out fundraising for this new genre of gaming, typically doing anything. As I say, I was once at a conference in London, and in the venture things, at one hand, there was the high risk stuff, which was crypto. And then you went a little further down the higher risk lane and it said gaming. And you guys are doing both crypto and gaming, which in their minds puts you at the very risky end. It'd just be good to understand how receptive you found investors to what you're doing.
In our recent experience, I would say at the very least, people we've talked to, we always ask each other questions to gauge our mindsets. And I've been asked the question a lot in that I've been asked, what do we expect from the people we want to fund us or to work with us or to invest in us? And I would always say we are looking for gamers as well. We're looking for people who understand what we do, understand what we play, and why we believe in it. And it generally had been easier to bridge that even through the risk, in that instead of taking two risky plays, it's actually using one risky play to leverage another, in which case crypto making gaming or giving gaming another window to look out of, and it's something that investors generally have gravitated to, and not just investors but partners as well. In terms of the technology, it's not really, I wouldn't call it a Wild West, but it's more like it's not really wild, but it's like we're building everything that we're stepping on the next day. So it's pretty exciting, and that's something that's got me going and got us going, and giving us a lot of good vibes going through it all.
Nice one. It's always a good note to end on, that it's risky squared plus building it step by step, day by day, when it might not exist. But everybody, these folks play Check Games. You should make sure you follow Monica's instructions and join all of their channels so that you can follow the progress of the first game in Battle Races, and then probably this shortly to follow second game. Thanks very much for joining us today and talking to the teams. We look forward to seeing you in the next panel, which is about game creation in the metaverse. So gaming heavy this afternoon, but it should be fun.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.
I thought, and we're live. So hello everybody for Gaming in the Metaverse panel. Obviously a continuation of some of the previous panels that we've had that have been a bit more focused on play to earn specifically, a topic that we're going to come back to, but we're going to speak a little bit more generally. So I'm very happy to welcome on a great panel here. We've got Giovanni, Amy, and Richard. I'm going to let them introduce themselves very shortly. I think quick intro to the panel and some things that we're going to be talking about. So as I said, you know, we've obviously a lot of focus on play to earn as a consequence of Axie Infinity. I actually didn't know that those revenues make them one of the most successful games in the world. That was new news to me, but it totally makes sense. And now we're kind of expecting this gold rush to both deploy native blockchain games and integrate NFTs into existing game development and publishing. And I want to kind of explore that whole value chain, really, and how blockchains and NFTs can impact that, can improve it. But of course, I also want to kind of ground some of this thinking in reality. And so I know both Amy and Richard, you know, like us, see a lot of startups pitching them, different stages, different ideas. And I imagine most of the time they're saying no. So it's interesting to understand, you know, why they're saying no, how they're kind of time horizon things. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got Gio, who is at the bleeding edge of trying to leverage this technology in a very disruptive way, disruptive both to, I guess, the incumbent gaming industry, but even to, I guess, Gen 1 of blockchain gaming. So he's challenging a few norms I know he won't mind being quite controversial in some of his answers. So looking forward to getting into that. So enough of me. Let's do a quick introduction. Amy, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm currently an investment partner at Lightspeed Ventures. And Lightspeed, we're a multi-stage geo and category venture capital firm, been around for 25 years and have about $12 billion under management. And I personally cover crypto gaming and consumer growth. Started my career inside Venture Partners. I spent 7 years as a CFO, COO, most recently as an executive at Discovery.
Thank you, Amy. Richard.
Hey everyone, Richard Kim. I'm a GP at Galaxy Interactive. We've been one of the most active interactive entertainment-focused investors in the last couple of years. We invest both in game studios as well as the infrastructure supporting the gaming industry. And these days in particular, I'm quite focused on this intersection of Web3 and not just gaming, but the creator economy more broadly.
And I definitely say before we do an intro from Geo, Richard has this amazing Discord server specifically for kind of crypto gaming NFTs. So if you're not aware of it, you should definitely join it. What's the name of it, Richard?
It's on there's a link to it on my Twitter, Galaxy RTK.
Maybe as we go, you can drop a link into the chat there so people can follow it. I'd highly recommend it. And last but not least, Geo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Giovanni. I'm the founder of Radcolor. And my background is gaming industry. I've been working in Japan here for more of a decade, basically. And at the same time, in the last 2 years, I've been working with the Ethereum Foundation, building the Ethereum 2, one of the Ethereum 2 clients. And so what we're building today is the convergence of all this, and in the form of a decentralized gaming engine, which is both a game engine and a platform to play games and creations built with it.
Thanks, Gio. And obviously, we're going to go into much more detail specifically as to what Fragcolor is after this in a fireside chat. So we're going to kind of speak at a more high level. I want to kind of just sense check where our panelists think we are in the context of gaming in the metaverse generally. And then we can begin to zoom into specifically blockchain gaming, its potential and limitations. So I want to start with you, Amy, because I know you cover crypto gaming, but it's also much broader what happens at Lightspeed as well. And I'd like to get your kind of perspective on the key trends that we're seeing in gaming, especially in a metaverse context.
Yeah, sure. So there's been I think there's a lot of defining what the metaverse is in the context of gaming. And so there's been a lot of people that try to claim the term, and you see a lot of different shapes and sizes of that. And so, you have companies on the one spectrum, like platform gaming companies like a Roblox, or sort of games plus platforms like Fortnite, claiming that. You also have Facebook recently doing so as well. And they're doing more from the perspective of VR, with Oculus 2. I think at a high level, it's people generally define it as a set of digital experiences in which people are finding entertainment, learning, and potentially employment of some sort, or making money in the play to earn context in what is a digital environment. And I think we're also kind of aligned that in the metaverse, there's this concept that your digital lives are as maybe even more, or certainly extremely sort of important is compared to your real lives. And so, people have been, one of the things I've been thinking about is like what makes a metaverse and what makes a game like kind of on the path to one successful. And people define it as a set of features and sort of game experiences, but I think of it really as sort of people's basic needs. And if you think about Maslow's like hierarchy of needs, at the end of the day, like in terms of what makes an experience extremely meaningful, like, well, a player needs to find identity and reputation and potentially the ability to earn money in a digital environment to make that really important. And that's why one of the biggest trends I think in the metaverse is like this intersection of crypto and gaming, because it is potentially able to provide that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, so do you think, based on your definition of the metaverse, that it already exists, or is it kind of this future vision?
I think in the context of identity and reputation, it exists in a form. And I think the question is how much like sort of, investment and time people are putting in. I'm actually a subscriber that social networks are kind of like the earliest forms of it, because people have, if you take the case of Facebook, right? I mean, I think they define it largely as VR, at least in their press release, but I actually think what they've done with Facebook and then Instagram is actually a lot closer to this concept in the metaverse, in the sense that, you know, in your Instagram, you have a lot of people have, you know, their personal profile, they have their professional identity, and then they have a third identity potentially in, you know, on the Facebook main app. And I think that is actually a core of what would be like potentially a game or a deeper metaverse concepts. It starts there. And then I think, you know, as you allow people to spend more time with various sort of ways to entertain themselves, play games, learn, etc., it becomes a much deeper experience.
And so from your perspective, with this recent Facebook announcement, I guess this doesn't feel like it's not new news, right? Facebook has already been on that pathway, and actually it's an easier transition from being a social media company into a metaverse company.
I do think so. I think that, you know, the way that it was announced, probably definitely like a marketing announcement, but I think it really resonated with me.
Got you. So over to you, Richard. So I know you're kind of a big advocate of crypto, and, you know, deeply involved in blockchain gaming, but also kind of gaming more generally. And I believe you're one of the most active gaming funds, full stop, right? Even beyond just crypto. So how do you look at gaming in the metaverse as a spectrum, or what dimensions do you analyze it by? Is it open and closed, or is it more nuanced than that?
Yeah, so we invest across the board, not just in blockchain game studios, but, you know, in game studios, whether it's your seed stage mobile studio or your kind of highly ambitious cross-platform AAA cloud native, all the buzzwords in one, you know, type of title. I think blockchain gaming is a thesis we invested against pretty early. You know, we have big stakes in Mythical Games, creator of Blankos. I sit on the board of Immutable, creator of Gods Unchained and Immutable X, and, you know, several others. And it's been interesting to see the space evolve. I'll say in the last 6 months in particular, seeing Axie in particular grow to the DAU it has in the context of being non-free to play has been absolutely flabbergasting to me. You know, like, my biggest question on every blockchain game I've ever encountered was, what's the TAM of this stuff, right? And can you really scale? Because it goes against everything the gaming industry has learned in the last 10 years in terms of free to play. Like, Axie today is not free to play. It's $1,700 to play, right? And, you know, the flip side of that is interesting, though, because, you know, by virtue of ecosystems like Axie or the Sandbox and what they're doing in terms of their tens of millions of dollars of land sales, is you get people on side even before the full content experience is fully released. And what that does for your K factor and your retention results in kind of metrics the gaming industry has never seen. So, you know, I used to be firmly on the side of, you know, everything that's not free to play doesn't work, but now I'm not so sure, to be honest. And, you know, I think as this shift in thinking happens in the blockchain gaming space, you know, like, I think of it in stages, right? So you can imagine your traditional game studio today, no blockchain angle whatsoever, right? And we continue to think those are quite interesting, precisely because there's going to be a lot of titles for which blockchain gaming doesn't work, because, you know, a immutable, open economy driven type of title is not going to suit all forms of gaming today. So that's point one. Point two is, if your title can suit these types of content, then, you know, there's an evolution of how far you go down the blockchain rabbit hole, right? The kind of most obvious is, hey, let's make some cosmetics NFTs and make them kind of tradable and get all the benefits of composability, interoperability, blah, 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 right? That, you know, it's not that straightforward because of things like scalability and other things, but it's going to be the first step, right? Now, I think the interesting point here is you don't need a blockchain to have open trading of digital objects. It's just a particularly good way, because you can tap into existing ecosystems from a composability standpoint of trading these things, that it just makes it easier, but it's certainly not the only way. where I'm kind of like looking these days is, okay, what's the next evolution of this, right? Like, so you started to see through titles like Illuvium and a couple of others, this idea of, imagine the game studio as a construct, like doesn't exist anymore, or it doesn't exist in its traditional form, right? Where the enterprise value of this piece of content is geared towards the collective, like the DAO, the token, right? And it's a real mentality shift to gear all the value you create from your content to a community-owned construct, right? Now contrast that with the first case of, hey, I'm a traditional game studio, I have traditional equity holders, and I'm going to sell some NFTs as another revenue stream. That's very traditional in some sense, right? If you go down the other spectrum of, hey, we're not going to have the traditional constructs, but be much more this decentralized collective, almost as if, like, to use an example, it would be as if Fortnite and Epic Games didn't exist in its current form. Instead, you had this loosely organized group of creatives, artists, technologists coming together, getting paid in the equivalent of V-Bucks, and having all their upside be in the form of this community token. Right? It's just a very different organizational construct. So it'll be interesting. That kind of like cutting edge of things to me is going to be one of the most interesting areas to watch.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on the point around user-generated content with Geo. But before I do, there's some interesting points that came up in what you were saying. So I don't know if you caught the last panel with Geo and the crew and Gabby, Dizon, but they referenced this kind of land sale component. And I know that a lot of people outside of blockchain gaming, crypto gaming, have been very critical of it. They kind of think to sell land in advance of content is somehow, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's a scam. But I think, Gio put it really well. It's like if you give gamers property rights, then they have a bigger stake in the system, in the economy, that they're more vested. So I wanted to get your perspective, and you're having conversations with people that have nothing to do with crypto. How is the outside gaming world looking in at what's going on in blockchain?
Yeah, great question. I think the first thing I'll say is this question of property rights in gaming is not new. If you read some of the MMO books from Bartle and others over the last few decades, like there's whole chapters dedicated to who owns what property rights in games. Blockchain doesn't magically change that. Rather, it's a construct of existing laws. On the question of how traditional game developers are thinking about incorporating blockchain, I'd say it's a slow burn. From my standpoint, it's like, hey, why not do a land sale? It's a great way to get your players aligned. And I think the first interesting point that one of our founders raised with me was, in the context of the cloud native game that he's building, like the whole game design is to have the equivalent of planets in his title be instantly disposable, like spin up and down based on essentially where players are playing, right? And this idea of immutability is not necessarily consistent with the core game design of a lot of MMOs and just games generally, right? So that's point one. And so point two was he was thinking, okay, what can we think about at the meta layer in terms of encouraging the speculative, open economy trading type of stuff that crypto people love, but on top of the core game design, which will remain unchanged and fundamentally top down and designed by nature. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to think about how you encourage that kind of like guild-like behavior at the meta level without changing the core game design at the bottom. And then secondly, on the question of land sales, even if it is consistent with your game design, like for example, it works better in UGC contexts than it does in narrative-driven contexts. There is that concern, as you say, about, hey, this is like selling stuff ahead of the game even being launched, which feels kind of scammy. So I think there's a lot of disbelief in terms of the sustainability of a lot of these land sales, and I think time's going to tell. I think at some point we'll see a glut of land sales that don't work, particularly outside the sandbox context. But I don't think we've hit that point yet.
And then just quickly, do you subscribe to this idea that with Axes is to play to earn what Clash of Clans was to free to play? This kind of turning point for the industry. Do Do you subscribe to that?
I think it's a turning point in terms of getting a lot of people looking at the space, like, because you can no longer credibly say, even assuming blockchain never hits quote mainstream adoption, right? This was always the objection to blockchain gaming. Oh, it's like a crypto thing. your DAO is going to be a couple hundred, max couple thousand users. You'll never get to hundreds of thousands or millions in scale. I think the interesting point is, sure, maybe you won't get to millions in scale, maybe. But what's interesting is the transaction volume of these economies, when you align incentives, is so powerful that maybe you don't need mainstream adoption. Maybe crypto is interesting enough in its own right to support venture scale businesses. So that's like shift number one. And then shift number two is like, I talked to someone at a large game publisher the other day, and you look at the last 10 years of mobile free to play, and I could make a pretty strong argument that all mobile IAP, not purchases, have a financial ROI of minus 100%. So is that sustainable in a market that's hit $100 billion of kind of free-to-play revenues? I don't think anyone's comparing skins purchases in Fortnite today to Axie, but at a certain point in the evolution of this, they may, right? Not Axie specifically, but like games with AAA-like experiences where users are getting value for their time. And that'll be the interesting thing to see.
So Gio, this comment around UGC, user-generated content's come up a couple of times now, and without necessarily going really deep into specifically how that plays out in blockchain gaming, but like more generally in a gaming context, in a metaverse context, what is the role of user-generated content, and how is, I guess, the relationship between creator and player changing? And I'm thinking more kind of like Minecraft and Roblox necessarily than any blockchain game.
Yeah, sure. So I think I want to connect a little bit to what Amy was saying before, that today the metaverse is also Facebook, Instagram, and so on. And actually, back in 2005, I think I was a user of Second Life, and I got to know about Facebook while I was inside Second Life. So that's a very funny thing, and quite a big topic on its own. And in there, user-generated content was everything. So was literally everything. I think that there is no metaverse without user-generated content. Without user-generated content, we just got games, and that are built by developers. They're not driven by the script is already written and so on. So I know that Roblox, Minecraft, they're huge examples, but they're not just that. I often see the funny thing about this is that I often see like I feel like a veteran. I feel like I've seen everything already when I was a user in Second Life and making a lot of money in there actually. So today everything is coming up again for some reason. I guess that it's also the crypto and in general probably more powerful machines, and probably COVID was a big element bringing this people more at home and so on. So I think that user-generated content will be the catalyst for widespread and the catalyst of adoption of the metaverse, but also for cryptocurrency could be a big boost. But we need to remove friction between idea and creation. So if today we talk about play to earn, why not talk about create to earn, for example? So user-generated content will definitely be something that will last forever and will create many jobs in the metaverse, for example. So literally, why not building the metaverse within the metaverse? Yeah, so what we're missing though is in my opinion, and I know you mentioned don't go too deep, but I think that what we're missing is the tools. And if you look at Roblox and Minecraft, their strength is the tool that they are. The strength is that it's easy for players to enter, and there is a very fast time to fun where they actually create things rather than just play by the script. They instead write the script, they write the narrative themselves. So I think it's going to be huge, and as I mentioned, it is the metaverse. The metaverse is user-generated content and players becoming creators, and creators playing the content that other players build is the real strength of the future in the metaverse.
So if we look at Roblox as an example, because I only learnt the stat as a consequence of working with you. But if you look at the economics of that split, the create, and of course there's a long tail of creation anyway. So assuming you make any money at all from your creation, let's assume there is some revenue to be made. Can you just talk us through how that's currently split, like how the pie is divided and how much actually ends up going to the creators themselves?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's part of generally of my pitch to have this graph. But in Roblox, I think it just about 24% goes to the creators, to the developers, and there is a lot of I'm not sure why they are keeping so much, to be honest, because I think that there is a small percent that goes into an investment pool. So basically, they are building their crypto, no, not crypto fund actually, but their fund. They are building their investment fund in there. There is also the fact that they are bound to pay 30% to Apple, for example, or I don't know what's the Google, but I think it's nearly the same. But then there is a lot of I'm not sure why, to be honest, because personally with Fracoro, we've been going through this kind of business models, and we really didn't see the reason for keeping so much from creators, which are the fuel of their economy. So yeah.
Well, I'm sure the venture capitalists on the panel could find several good reasons why that revenue might be leaking out the platform. But let's talk about, so let's kind of build upon that. So one thing is this democratization of tools to create content, but the other one is the ability to monetize that content and to kind of distribute it, right? And I think this is pitched as one of the promising things about blockchain, is that it enables that full 360 of democratization of the creative and game development process. And Richard, I know you talked about that a little bit later. What does a game studio look like, or what does game publishing look like in the metaverse? But maybe Gio, you can talk to it initially, and then I think it'd be great to get Richard's build.
Yeah, sure. No, actually, I want to build on what Richard mentioned before. Specifically, use a word that I love, which is composability, and and also talk about the fact of land. But let's start with composability. So creators today, as we were talking about before with Roblox, don't really get much back. But games are made by people, and those people create characters, the environments, interaction of the games you love. But these people generally in the game industry, in the normal legacy or whatever you want to call it, environment, are just commonly paid by salaries or just in Unity, for example, via asset store. In a way, I think it's very much unfair. Game publishers and companies get most of the royalty. So imagine instead if game studios, and that's where it comes the democratization of the creative process. Imagine if a game studio instead was just a special DAO where creators contribute to the game, and the contribution will always give them back what they deserve in terms of royalty. So I think that this is already possible with smart contracts, for example. So that's my take on it, and that's why the composability.
Yeah. Okay. So Richard, to kind of circle back, you were talking about trying to reimagine what game development, game studio, game publishing looks like in the context of the metaverse, or a more decentralized version of the metaverse leveraging blockchain. How does blockchain NFTs specifically allow for new models of financing that development process? Because if you want to do a AAA game, it's going to take you several years. It's going to cost you tens to hundreds of millions in development and thousands of people, right? Can that really be replicated in any other way than this centralized companies?
I think there's a financial aspect to that question and a creative organizational side of that question, right? So financially, I think the market's already proven the answer is yes, right? Like you look at what's happening on Mirror, for example, and the Ethereum documentary, that was fun. I contributed to that because I thought it was a cool idea. I think they raised over 1,000 ETH on that. The idea that you can own media as a consumer, and it's almost like Kickstarter plus now, right? And then in turn create long-term games around that community that shares those values and interests. Including potentially a token model, right? Like in NFT space, we see a ton of examples of DAOs forming around, not just the acquisition of artwork, but even like Fingerprints DAO comes to mind, like taking like an interest in things like autoglyphs and figuring out interesting ways the community can create games around that. So I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation around this. The extent to which any of this can be applied organizationally to the intense focus and creative direction you need to create a great game, I think is yet to be proven. Like if you ask me, have you seen a model of a fully decentralized game studio that's so captivated the hearts and minds of its players, while also kind of fully financing the development of the game for that player base? I think that's a super cool concept in principle. And maybe the evolution of that is in stuff like Yield Guild and other guilds that are increasingly going to have strengths in terms of like a captive player base, such that it would make sense for them to go finance a game for that player base. But yeah, we haven't really seen that to date yet.
Yeah, and I've seen some, it's not quite in gaming, but I've seen some examples of NFT sales of characters in quite a limited story context that have begun to be, because of the strength of the sale, a couple of million plus. They've already had Hollywood reach out and try to basically buy the rights to turn it into a movie. And I can imagine, we might begin to see the same in gaming, where, I don't know, Bored Apes seems to have captured the hearts and minds of the NFT community. It's established some kind of fit somehow, a community fit. Is it a push that a publishing company or game development company comes along and says, hey, we'd like to collaborate on turning that into a game? So it's interesting to see at which stages NFTs could be used to proof a concept. So Amy, to kind of build on this, I guess this question comes in two parts, really. So do blockchains and NFTs allow for enhanced economics within gaming? And I mean that from both ends of the spectrum. So I think Richard alluded to the fact that perhaps many games are actually loss-making if you really looked at the numbers. They're kind of, they manage to just basically, the cost of capital is cheap enough that they can effectively throw a lot of money at a game, even if it's loss-making. So could it potentially, make game development more profitable or less risky? And then on the other hand, does it provide enhanced economics to the user, or how does it provide enhanced economics?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, making a game and definitely making a AAA game is really challenging. It takes a lot of time and takes a lot of resources. And so I think actually that, potentially doing a token, having a token essentially creates another, it's sort of like democratizes where that funding might come from a little bit more. And so like now, when I'm talking with a studio and increasingly AAA studios that want to launch a game sort of natively with blockchain in various ways, and that usually involves tokenized currency in the game, they're a part of the fundraise is still coming from sort of traditional strategics, because investors are adding value beyond just capital. Over the number of years, it's like we're working with a studio around helping them think through team development, company building, sort of and then there's like specific steps it takes on the path to publishing a game. Although that in a blockchain context, that actually looks quite different than traditional methods with publishers. And then there's usually some sort of public sale and sort of blend a private and public sale around a token, the studio sort of token treasury. And that's really quite different and revolutionary, I would say. Pragmatically, on the token side, there's a question of valuation alignment. This has come up quite a bit because there's sort of on the private side, we're sort of pegged to certain sort of ranges of valuation, but the reality is that when these blockchain studios have sort of ICO their token, because it's liquid, there's like a significant premium to that. And so how do you sort of bridge the gap between the two has been like a topic. And then to your other question, around just the sharing of the economics, that is pretty revolutionary because before, game development is extremely centralized. The publisher pretty much owns the vast majority of the economics that happens, whether it's like in the content or in esports or whatever. And now, that economics is also shared with players as well, with this very liquid currency around the token. And I think Axie is a great example of that. But I think that comes in two flavors. So in terms of you have, if you think about play to earn, it provides incredible sort of method of employing a player. But the negative way of thinking about it is that it's actually another form of user acquisition. But instead of like paying that cost once, it's actually an ongoing tax on the game economy, right? These are people that are coming into your game paying $1 and expecting to make $2, $3, $4 out of that, which the game has to continue producing in one way or another. There's a lot of different, ways to sort of supplement that earn expectation. And so it's both like a way to democratize earning power, but also does provide, inject sort of like unique challenges to a game studio that they need to think through.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it comes back to this point that Gio highlighted around composability, because again, like Bored Apes isn't a game, but I think what it really demonstrates is if you look at how that franchise has evolved well beyond its initial creators, I could see that also happening in gaming. And I know this is a big part of Frag Color that we'll talk about a little bit later, but if layers can constantly be added in a permissionless way to a franchise, it can kind of extend its economy, it can extend the revenue that can be generated from its users. So actually,
ability is interesting. I think in terms of the crawl, walk, run sort of progression, there's a lot of DeFi projects that immediately go to, okay, well, items, NFTs, etc., will be fully composable. That is, I think Richard also mentioned that is completely different from how games are designed today. There's first of all like the pragmatic fact that different games use different game engines, whether it's like Unreal or Unity or or another infra provider, which isn't super conducive to having like items being like composable cross game. And then there's if there's a power dynamic, then how do you actually use a sword in one game into another? And so I think there's a lot of practical challenges there. I think in the longer term, that is a really amazing concept of it. I think the first step though is that composability may begin with just even like in one game or in the games within a developer's gaming ecosystem.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I know Gio probably wants to pounce on that one, so we'll give him the opportunity a bit later. But I want to ask, because you raised a really good point about how you assess these from an investor's perspective as a venture capitalist, and I'd also like to get Richard's perspective on that too, because now not only do you have the opportunity to invest in equity, not only do you have the opportunity to invest in a fungible token, you now have non-fungible tokens. So you have these three asset types. They all interplay somehow. Value is captured or distributed in different ways. Like, how do you assess increasingly complex economies where you could take exposure to one or multiple? So I'm going to keep that with Amy, and then we'll ask Richard.
I'll just quickly touch on that. It's definitely a challenge, and I think an added component to that is that different teams assign different amounts of value towards those different types of value creation instruments, and so I think like VCs are very quickly trying to understand how to interact with the community, how to interact with the team, and also how to invest to actually kind of participate in this value accretion. Because if I think about DeFi, and I spent a lot of time in DeFi and talking with projects, there is like I would say most people are like don't ascribe that much value to the equity. They actually want to, they're building their projects and they want to capture most, if not all, of this value in the token. And so I think this is a really new concept for funds. First of all, a lot of funds can't even invest in tokens. There's a lot of structural challenges this provides for funds. And so there's like a very quick learning process going on right now, certainly with Lightspeed and a lot of other funds. But I think it is helpful to hear the teams articulate how they see these different classes of shareholders accruing value, and that's like, a form of revenue share. There's a lot of hand waviness right now, like all will accrue value, but I mean, there's like practical, actually, like implication, like sort of like execution of that's helpful. So that like all classes of shareholders stay aligned, and you don't have this distraction as as they're not, and everyone is sort of still aligned towards this creation of this amazing project and game.
I was going to pass that back to Richard, but actually realised we're coming close on time, and there's a few more things I want to get through. So, Richard, if you don't mind, and I'm sure much of what Amy said you'd probably agree with anyway. I want to get into the limitations of blockchain gaming, because, Amy, you just highlighted that this idea that you can just transfer concepts that we see in DeFi immediately into gaming and NFTs. Might not be possible, or it might not be possible in the near term. So I want to get everybody's perspective on the limitations of where we are today, realistically, in the context of blockchain gaming. So let's go to maybe Richard to talk about what are the constraints that you're seeing in on-chain game development and adoption around things like cost to play. I think one of you mentioned it earlier. Actually, it's not free to play a game at the moment, right? I think it was Axes. It's like $1,000. Yeah, you said it, $1,500 or something just to enter that game.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious things people talk about, right? Like, so briefly worth recapping, things like scalability, custody, all the technological things. I think the more interesting thing, and those are very real, and actually the answer to the question today, you could take a pretty optimistic view that these things are going to be solved in the next year or so. So then the question becomes one of design, and like this question of, does the extrinsic incentives that things like tokens and play to earn create, are they such like hard incentive mechanisms that they actually take you out of that flow state that every game designer aspires to achieve? And so this balance of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations for participating in these ecosystems is a real question. And I think there's a perception of play to earn today that it's primarily like grindy type of games with a bunch of people who earn minimum wage in some low-income country, and that's why play to earn is big, right? The extent to which this gets big in Western, Western markets, like, I think will be interesting, right? Like, at what point do you see, the traditional gamers start to shift into play to earn? I think that's going to be much more a function of just great design, and there's the structural question of like whether the two are actually mutually inconsistent across a whole host of titles.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good segue into the final question I wanted to throw at Gio, which is, Richard, you mentioned this flow state, and perhaps now in some instances there is enough of an economic incentive where people will happily kind of break that flow to overcome some of the friction that you would experience in a blockchain game today. But to kind of focus on that flow state or the frictions around UX, Gio, what do you see as the UX problems or frictions to adopt blockchain games? And can you talk us through, I guess, that in both a mobile context, a casual gaming context, versus say something that might be done through the browser?
Right. So I think there's multiple points. One is connected to even play to earn and what was Rich was saying. Like, I strongly believe that to onboard non-crypto and so first of all, I actually think that in the future we will not have crypto games or blockchain games. We will just have games, first of all, and most likely they will probably be decentralized. They will use Web3 and so on. But the friction is in multiple things, and one is people definitely don't want to pay something immediately to actually try the game. So the free-to-play part plays a huge role. And so, but at the same time, it's completely connected with stuff like setting up wallets. Like, you don't want to open a mobile game on your phone and start thinking about where is my MetaMask or thinking about keys and so on. So the challenge is at many layers, not just economic, or even if they have the money to play, but it's also do they have the knowledge to actually go through all these steps? And I think that this is what we for example as builders have to solve. We have to find a way to make users understand or anyway somehow hide this friction and improve it. Like with the regular game industry it's easy. Like there is support you can call if you have a problem. There's a support desk that fixes your account and whatever. But if you have a blockchain game, who's gonna reset your password? So this is a huge UX problem, and if it's not solved, the adoption will not be that big, as well as web browsers. So web browsers are not the metaverse. There's many people in this space that confuse a web browser with the metaverse. So they are becoming slowly the big macromedia flash all over again. If Steve Jobs was still alive, he probably would be furious, actually. So I strongly believe that everything should run natively at massive capacity. So I'm really waiting to see, and we are working. Our engine is actually fully multi-platform. In fact, I want to see blockchain games and projects based on blockchain running on natively on iOS, but also consoles and so on. And it's a huge challenge, not just for the UX. There's also like legal or anyway convincing big players. But yeah, that's the biggest. But it's still UX. It's still the way that people will not notice anymore. This is a crypto game. It's just a game, but it happens to actually have a token. It happens to have an economy. It happens to have investors that invested in the token. So yeah, it's a huge challenge. The thing is, what's happening today is not Web3. It's Web 2.5. That's the reality. Web3 games don't exist yet, and we're planning to change that pretty much.
All right. Well, look, I think Gio's probably teased you enough that we can move into the fireside now. I want to say a really big thank you to our other panelists. I think it's been fascinating talk. Thanks both Richard and Amy for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. So we'll have a 5-second pause, and I think we're going to go straight into the next fireside. So stick with us. Specific as you can. All right, let's go. So we're straight into next fireside with Gio. Hopefully, he has whet your appetite as to what he's building, a decentralized gaming engine that works across any and every console, allowing for native games. Wow. So we've actually just crossed 1,500 people, which is awesome, watching live as we speak. So no pressure, Gio. Are you going to show slides?
Yep, I will.
All right, let's do it.
Slides. I think
as ever, guys, feel free. We can see it. Feel free to ask questions. Ideally, do it through the Ask a Question button. People can upvote that. I'll try and answer at the end. But if you're just feeling lazy, drop it into the chat. I'll try to aggregate them towards the end. All right, Gio, tell us what you're building.
Yep. So what we're building is a decentralized gaming engine. And notice the gaming part, which means we are building both a game engine and a multi-platform app to deliver those games and interactive experiences. We are actually a team of game industry professionals, not web industry, that worked together on a game engine already a few years ago. And making an easy analogy, what we're building is the popularity and platform penetration of Roblox meets the ease of use and creative power of PlayStation Dreams in an open mesh of content, delivery, curation, assets exchange, and composition. But let's dive in a little bit on what problems we find in the space. The current metaverse is built on top of current game engines, which mostly is Unity and Unreal, basically. Those engines are packed with cool features. They were built many years ago, though, even before Web 2 and let alone Web 3. And basically, the big problem is that games made with Unity or Unreal, even if they're built with the same tool, are absolutely not interoperable. As well as content creators and freelance artists often sell their creation cheap to the developers of a game, and so not to the players, and the profits are very small. Coupled with other problems like online games having crazy inflationary economies and no ability to export value or items outside of the games. And those games might actually as well disappear anytime since they are centralized, and if the developers pull the plug, it's over for the players. And finally, online games don't really scale. They're limited by computational power of the server they run on. So having this dream of multiple 100,000 players at the same time, it's not possible yet. We are working on a solution. The problem is big and complex, but we think that we can. In 2021, all the necessary technology are actually available. We've been touching all of them. The reason we're building this big amount of tech here is the fact that we think creators should, first of all, that's a big point, creators should receive fair royalties and directly from users and players. So here comes NFTs, and specifically layered and nested NFTs. With them, we can allow a rich degree of combination and composition, as I was mentioning in the previous panel, of user-generated content. And so at the same time, our platform's games and general creation are automatically living marketplaces where every entity is in the virtual world is an NFT. Another key aspect we're taking care of is also storage. Everything stored on chain allows games to be unbreakable and available forever. So users can even decide to fork the game if they want. And all of these points lead to magic, which is total interoperability. As mentioned before, games made with Unity or Unreal are not interoperable, but with Fracolor's tech instead, games are absolutely interoperable and they can interface with each other without friction. This is the only thing that matters if we want to call the metaverse open. Interoperability of everything, not just avatars and fashion. So to look at the market real quick, the game industry is huge, as well as the fact that it's converging into immersive and gaming and mobile. So we need to target those. But the biggest disruption we will cause is towards creative platforms like Roblox and Rec Room, both with a big market and crazy valuation, but both box, centralized, full of legacy technology and approaches. And as we were mentioning on the previous panel, Roblox royalty scheme is pretty crazy. In reality, creators just get 24%. And in Dreams, they get nothing at all. And in Rec Room, I couldn't decipher the website, to be honest. It goes through a centralized process of subscription and redeeming. And without considering that in all these platforms, there is no such thing as primary or secondary market. And all these platforms are absolutely not interoperable. And nothing at all in terms of scarcity. But we know that simple users and players of the metaverse today don't really care so much about how centralized is the platform they use. It's very short-sighted. In a few years, they will probably realize. But we think our strength today is creative users. And that's why we're building everything towards them. As a final slide, I will show you a little bit the tech stack of what we're building. The core is a multi-platform runtime and game engine we've been building for 2 years now. It's already on GitHub. Everything is open. Runs on every platform, including mobiles and web browsers even. Desktop and consoles in the future. Fully modular and built to scale. We are currently building on top the creative programming environment, and those two components are finally packaged into a multi-platform app that allows users to and creators to easily deploy their games. The reason we're building a game engine from scratch is freedom and blockchain tight integration. Our systems allows creations to live on chain in the form of NFT layers that can be shared, composed, and so on. We call them fragments, and get ready to own fragments of the metaverse. Thank you, Jamie.
All right, good stuff. So as I said, everybody ask questions through the Ask a Question bar as you go. So where do we start? I think it would be good to just go into a little bit more detail about fragments, because I think obviously, as the name Fragcolor would suggest, fragments is a key concept, a fundamental concept to what you're trying to achieve with the gaming engine. So could you just talk us through what's possible today, what you imagine will be possible tomorrow, as that composability is kind of just unleashed?
Sure. So a fragment is an NFT, and the word fragment means that it can also be fragmented. So fragments are smart contracts that today are on the Ethereum smart chain, and basically you can have a fragment that is a full NFT game, but this game itself is made of other smaller fragments that are assets, models, environments, scripts, anything. So as you were hinting before with layers, so it's pretty much layers. It's games built in layers. But the particular thing of it is that each of these fragments have an owner, and this owner is the creator, most likely. And so what happens is that if you want to create a game, there is this big decentralized access store with many fragments that you can use, and there are some mechanics connected to things that we will announce in the future. But in a nutshell, you can select whatever asset you want, you include them, you make your game, and you release your game as a fragment, which is an NFT. Automatically, you will get some smart contracts on chain and so on. But the thing is that people buying your game will not just pay you, will pay you the most because you are the maker of the game, but will also pay and distribute royalties to everybody that contributed, even indirectly and perpetually forever. So that's the essence of a fragment.
Yeah, so I think this then comes to your idea about creative users. So it's almost like UGC Max, right? In that you're imagining a world, I don't know, with no game development studio, right? That actually it's an individual or a group of individuals, potentially loosely affiliated, potentially that never directly collaborate at all, that can collectively develop and iterate a game franchise. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, sure. So the reason for this is I've been building game engines in my past decade or even more, and I can totally see that the game industry is completely stagnating. And so what I believe at the same time is that we should look into the future. So what we're building is a tool for the future. And in the future, it's already shaping. You could see with OpenAI that is automatically generating code and all sorts of technologies coming out, low code, no code. And what we are building, and we're building a team of people expert in this topic to build the next generation of programming, because I strongly believe that the programming languages, programming in general, are completely at the hunter-gatherer stage still. We didn't do any major discovery or improvement in that aspect. So our mission is indeed to allow users and players to actually create and easily shape the metaverse themselves.
Yeah, and I think that idea of both perpetual on-chain royalties for any kind of fragment plus no code creation allows for, or promises anyway, incredible velocity of game development, right? Environment development. That if you manage to pull it off, and of course we believe that you will, no gaming studio could compete with, right? They could potentially participate in it, but the idea that a centralized group of people on contracts, no matter how big the team, they're limited, and they're limited by the capitalization of the company and everything else, versus this swarm of developers feels really powerful, and I think promises to solve for one of the big and just criticisms of the open metaverse blockchain gaming environments, which is they're generally empty worlds, right? So I think that kind of speaks to that promise. Now, you mentioned on-chain a lot. Now, I know that you've been working in one of the core teams for ETH2 for the past couple of years. So, you're intimately involved in scaling Ethereum and understanding its constraints. And I know at the moment, Frag works off Ethereum, but it's not going to be limited to it. But you're talking about entirely on-chain games. So a game that is on-chain and is an NFT. How's that possible?
Well, it's a challenge, but if you ask me this question, and if I actually pitched you this project a couple of years ago, I would just say that it's a crazy idea. But today, I think that it's very doable. And you guys are also showing it before with Filecoin, for example. So there is tech that already allows this kind of huge amount of storage, or anyway huge amount of volume of transaction going on. That's why, as you mentioned, indeed, I was involved in Ethereum, and so for me, it's very natural to build on top of Ethereum, but not only. So what we have in our tech stack is actually a substrate sidechain right now, which can evolve in many other things. But right now, I think it's the best tech that we could find, and the reason is not just on chain storage, which will be a mix of on-chain storage on this chain plus distribution via IPFS, because IPFS is very fast. It's a super Napster for distributing things. But at the same time, this chain and a side chain allows us to reduce the friction that we were mentioning in the panel before about UX. We can suddenly have 0 fees if we wanted to. We can allocate an amount of energy that everyday players can allocate and use. So this is the key, and it is very ambitious. And I have to say thanks to you for that, and I'm very happy about it, because I remember when we started the accelerator with OV. I aimed at a little bit less, but one meeting with you say, just be ambitious, and I completely went down and wrote this full story, and I think that it's very possible. The problem is scaling it. The problem is building a team that is capable to build it. But I think that this is the medicine for that is the fact that I've been working in the game industry, and I know lots of crazy good engineers that I just need to convince and board the team. It's very hard with COVID though, because there's no beers and no way to actually drink together. So,
but you're doing a good job. You need to be building out the team.
Yeah.
I think we're coming up on time.
Sure.
So a couple of things I want to ask. Of course, everybody's in the chat loving the concept. Some of them not quite believing it's possible, or in disbelief that this thing could be possible. But I think maybe they kind of want it to be possible. Can you tell us, for example, can you quantify what's possible that you can do on chain now? Because I think that's really important. But secondly, can you just tell us at what stage the gaming engine's at? And I know you've got a couple of fully on-chain game releases happening in the process imminently. Can you talk about the type of game that's possible today? And then how quickly you intend to be able to get to like a AAA game standard,
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. It's gonna take some time, but we have already deployed. So as I was mentioning in the pitch, what we have already is this foundation that can already serve as the game engine. What we're building on top is the user experience. So what's gonna happen from now is making those users become developers. But today we already have an MVP that we already deployed actually on the Ethereum mainnet. We play a little bit only with testnets, and it's already able to mint fully on-chain games. It currently runs on the web browser, so WebAssembly. And we have 3 partnerships actually today that we're building together a few games. And we are starting with single player games. It's a little bit of a very strange trend, but the thing is, to build the multiplayer part, it's going to be very complicated, and we need to scale in terms of company, financing, funding. And so we're starting with simple NFT drops as a single player, but the peculiarity of them, and one of the major distinctions with Unity games, for example, is that we allow players to actually customize them. So one of these games, for example, you can mint your own punk and engrave it into the game as an NPC. Our games are fully dynamic, and this dynamic is decided on chain. So yeah, to answer the question, it will take some time, but we hope to scale and build bottom up rather than top down.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting is, so that particular game, I mean, I can't wait for it. I've obviously got a bit of an inside view where people can effectively integrate punks and Bored Apes into a game and battle them, which is totally awesome and really speaks to this composability that's possible as a consequence of them being on-chain. But I also think what's really interesting is if you look at what's going to be happening on Frag Color, it's gonna kind of echo what's been happening with NFTs more generally, which is, everything starts out quite pixelated. Stylistically, it's kind of references 80s and 90s, games. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but over a period of years, we're going to migrate to a AAA game-like experience. And so in a way, we're kind of going to relive our childhood of arcade games on chain and watch as they mature, much in the same way we did on consoles and everything else. Could you just, I don't know if you have it to hand, but maybe given the code's live, drop it in your in the chat here, your GitHub repo, given it's live. I think people would probably love to see that if you have it to hand.
I think it's on our website. There are links to what we have on GitHub.
All right. Okay. So go to fragcolor, spelled in the US way, COLOR.com.
US way.
You can find a GitHub repo there. You can use it to deploy games without even speaking to Geo, right?
It's not ready yet to. We are in the process of open sourcing all the contracts. So just follow us on Twitter. Follow us. Join our Discord. Actually, the alpha is up on Discord. So we will soon release more stuff open.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks so much, Gio. Great panel, great fireside. Hope everybody enjoyed it. You guys are probably going to get bored of me because I am now hosting the next panel, which is also kind of linked in a way to
absolutely.
It's not quite a game, but really interesting look at how AI can be combined with NFTs and AR for creating virtual pets. So sounds crazy, but wait till you hear the discussion and the pitch by Matless. It's going to be amazing. So stick around.